Why is there another Jose Serrano? Ah,
I leave all the technical stuff to Will. It's like,
Well, you guys are ready to get going.
okay, thank you. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for CB8 Zooms, a webinar about public affairs in Community Board 8, which is located in Manhattan from 59th Street to 96th Street and from the East River to Central Park, and it also includes the very lovely Roosevelt Island. Today, we are joined by New York State Senator Jose Serrano, who is, in full disclosure, my state senator, as well as those of other people who live in the 29th district, which includes Yorkville and Roosevelt Island and parts of the Upper West Side and Harlem and parts of the Bronx. He is the chair of the Cultural Affairs, Tourism, Parks and Recreation Committees, and also chair of the Majority Conference, which I'm going to ask you about because I have no idea what that means. But anyway, welcome, Senator Serrano.
Hi, thank you so much, Lori, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be on the show with you, and my greetings to all the folks who've tuned in and folks from CBA. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. If you have questions, if you are watching right now and you are live, as we say, you can ask the senator questions by putting them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. You'll see on the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A section, and put your questions there, and we will try to get to them as many as possible. Okay, so I love the fact that this is interactive. So we'll get to that part of the program later. But let's start with, there are obviously issues that concern people in Yorkville and the Upper East Side and the CB8 district a little bit more than others, and many of them have a state component. So let's dive right into the Second Avenue subway. Governor Hochul has said that has a proposal, I believe, to make it go across 125th Street to not only extend it to 95th, but 125th and all the way across 125th Street. So let's talk about the impact that you find the Second Avenue subway will have for your district.
Well, that's a really important question, and an impact can cut both ways. But I certainly believe wholeheartedly that this is going to be a major plus for our community. The Second Avenue subway, and I remember when I was first elected to the Senate, we were talking about the Second Avenue subway and getting the funding for it. There was a lot of federal dollars for it. And there was a lot of work and construction, and folks who lived along the Second Avenue corridor throughout Yorkville and in other parts of the East Side, dealt with, dust and noise and things of that nature. But ultimately, the final product of having this additional mode of transportation on the East Side, which was sorely needed, is something that is of benefit. The idea of it continuing in these additional phases, moving north and then connecting along 125th Street to other lines, really does help open up transportation for folks from the Bronx and from the West Side. So again, all of these things linking together, I think, will create a more robust mass transit system for Uptown, for the Upper East Side, for East Harlem. And it will certainly, I think, provide an economic benefit. So I really am looking forward to this. I'm glad that the governor is making this one of the pillars within her budget. And I certainly look forward to working with my colleagues to see it through.
Yes, I have to say that the Second Avenue subway, from a personal perspective, has changed my life because I live really close to a stop, and I can get to the theater with one train ride. It's really, and I love to go to the theater and I love to go downtown, and one train ride, whereas it used to be, you'd have to go cross town, then you'd
Right.
take the 6 or the 7 or the, a 6 or 4, 5 or 6 to go downtown. So it's really marvelous. I absolutely love it. But
And
speaking
I
of, go
And
ahead.
also, I wanted to add, to piggyback on that, also these modern new stations that are part of this whole thing, I think are great, and they provide, I think, a blueprint for how we modernize our stations in other parts of the city. But again, along the new stretch of Second Avenue subway, these modern, bright, well-ventilated stations, I think, show how we could have it in other places too.
And don't forget accessible. That's the other thing that's
That's right.
really important, because there all people can use the subways. So that's wonderful. Speaking of subways, though, what can we do about fare beaters? That's been talked about a lot in recent days, because people are the fare paying public sees people jumping over the turnstiles all of the time, and they're talking about like a new door, and then there was a problem with the new door. It's like, why can't the MTA get it right? That's, I guess, what the question is. Why can't they find a way to make this, impenetrable? I know if that's the right word, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think it's a problem that requires a multifaceted approach. I think we should look at ways to ensure that low-income individuals and families can take part of the Fair Fares programs or other types of programs that can ensure that they can afford to ride, and that everyone basically can afford in the city of New York, regardless of their income, can afford to ride. And I think if you do that, you'll see you will address in a lot of ways what is happening. So I think it's good to sort of look at it from a holistic point of view on making sure that folks, that they can ride and that they can afford to do so. And then maybe modernization of the turnstiles to make them, less likely for people to get around them or evade them, like we see in other countries, and it seems to be working well. But again, I think it has to go hand in hand. I think that there needs to be, I think, a modernization of the turnstile system. But then we also need to look at what are some of the root causes for fare evasion.
Yeah.
Are there some, real, issues with, the types of differences in communities. People, things are getting so expensive, and I'm not making excuses, but just looking at reality. And I think when you approach it from a holistic point of view like that, you actually get to a better place. So I'm hoping we can certainly have that discussion.
I agree. I've been hearing a lot about the social contract, that's somehow post-pandemic, that the social contract has kind of broken down a little bit, and people don't feel that they're getting the service that they need, and so they just kind of dismiss the idea. But anyway, I agree with what you say about, it's a multifaceted approach that we have to do with this. And speaking of multifaceted approaches, talking about the subway leads us to the discussion of congestion pricing. And I know that I am not one of those who thinks the sky is falling, but there are people who are concerned that the influx of cars from the suburbs or from the other boroughs are going to compile above 60th Street, where it begins. And can you say anything to address that? As I said, I am not one of those who worry about that, but can you talk a little bit more about those concerns that people have?
Sure, and I think that's a really good question. And again, I'll sort of say that this is also a multifaceted answer. So in order for congestion pricing to work, there has to be improvements to our mass transit system to build capacity. And right now, when you ride like a sardine on the subway, you wonder, how are we going to fit even more people on this? Well, there has to be improvements in capacity and the number of trains and buses, and I think that will certainly be addressed through congestion pricing. But also the whole notion that above the zone, there will be additional traffic. Well, yes and no. It depends on the mindset of the driver at their point of origin. If they're starting in Westchester County and they believe there's no viable way that they can take mass transit from, and I'm just using Westchester County as an example, but if they can't originate on a mass transit system there, if they can, then they won't even bother bringing their vehicle in to Manhattan and then drive around. I mean, it's probably not going to be, if it's nearly impossible to find parking now, what makes anyone think that they'll find parking after congestion pricing is implemented? So I'm not sure if over the matter of a couple of weeks, if people will see that as an even viable option to bring the car in. So I do think that there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of what ifs, but I think the inherent theory behind congestion pricing in that it can reduce some of the maybe unnecessary traffic that clogs up our streets and increases pollution, while at the same time encouraging more people to use mass transit that is going to be hopefully increasingly more viable. I think it is certainly worth it. It's worth the opportunity, but I certainly have tremendous amount of concern and empathy for people who have raised their concern, raised their voice about what could go wrong. And it's our job as elected officials to listen to all of them, and to balance them and to, make sure that we are aware and we have a plan to mitigate to the extent that we can.
Do you think that there's going to be a period of time that we let the congestion pricing thing settle and then take another look at it and see what improvements can be done? Is there a set time? Like, is it, 6 months? We're going to see what it looks like in 6 months or whatever.
Well, I think like anything else in New York, it's going to have to be a very organic process. There's been a number of things over the years that I think people were a little bit unsure of how it would work out, but we would adjust, we would make changes, we would see how things are happening on the ground. And that's, I think, I think a necessary component of any local, state, or federal government, is to respond and react and to change course when needed. And that's what we do. So every year we're confronted with sort of building upon things that we've done in the past. And I could think of when we were looking to ban plastic bags in supermarkets, there was a major uproar. What's this going to mean? What's going to happen? And there was a period of adjustment in the beginning, but now it's become sort of nature, a second nature, that we're not going to expect the plastic bag at the supermarket, and life has gone on. So I do think that there is going to be a period of adjustment, but it's not going to be blind. We're going to be really looking at what happens if indeed this, everything comes together. Then we have to ensure that it's working for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I believe that. I think nobody likes change. I mean, nobody likes change, but in the final analysis, things tend to have a way of working out. So, and the example of the plastic bags is the perfect example. I don't walk out of the house now without like a bag in my purse, because I might need it. I might buy something. Okay, let's move on to your enthusiasm about the arts. As I said before, you are the chair of the wait, I'm going back to my notes. Cultural Affairs, Tourism, Parks, and Recreation. Um, what is it about the arts? My opinion about the arts is that, I mean, life is not worth living without the arts. But what are some of the things that you think contribute both to us individually and as a city?
Oh, I am so glad you've raised this question. The arts is something that I'm very passionate about, and throughout my years in government, now I think we're approaching my 22nd year in public office between the city council and the Senate. And in both legislative bodies, I had the good fortune of being chair of the Committee on Cultural Affairs or the ranking member when we weren't in the majority. And it has been such an absolute pleasure to deal with and grapple with and learn from the cultural community and see how it plays such an intrinsic role in our society. Prior to being an elected official, I worked in theater. I got to see firsthand how the arts were transformative in people's lives, how they told a story and presented a message that oftentimes wasn't being carried by the media or by the elected officials at that time. And it was done in such a way that it really did help and change people's lives. I saw the amount of jobs that were created by the arts. In the theater in particular, you have the costume staff and the front of house staff and the dramaturg and the set designers and the carpenters. And it was just amazing to see how this all came together, all for bringing this message. Now, what I think I found the most compelling of all my years in observing the arts has been that I feel it is probably the most perfect vehicle for bringing forth issues involving social justice, involving issues that maybe would be considered thorny, but they're not thorny issues when folks get together sort of in an artistic environment and learn about them. And give you a good example. In the 1980s and 90s, a lot of folks in power were not talking about what HIV/AIDS was doing to the community, but it was the artists, it was the playwrights, it was the actors who were weaving this narrative and telling this story and then educating us about what HIV/AIDS was doing to our communities. And suddenly it became something that it transcended the theater and it became mainstream discussion. It shows how the arts plays that role of developing and encouraging diversity and inclusion and celebration of things that normally people would see as differences, but they are really what make us so strong. So I do think that the arts have the ability to heal. We talk about post-pandemic, how we are all emotionally, physically, mentally drained and looking for ways to heal and to come together again. And the arts are that perfect medicine. And we have to fortify them. So as an elected official, as chair of this committee, I feel very strongly that the arts should be viewed as something far more than something some aesthetic that we should do it if we can, and if not, it's okay. No, it should be foundational. Support for the arts should be one of the pillars within our budget, whether it's a good budget or a bad budget. We should not ignore the arts. We should also remember that many artists are barely getting by, and they want wholeheartedly to continue to bring forth their gifts to society. They can't afford to do it. But what are we doing to make sure we have housing for artists, that we have wages that are fair for the work that they're doing, and that we value their work as something that is just as important as anything else that we're doing in society? So I know that CB8 does a lot with the arts. I know that you have the events on James Cagney Place where you give a platform for artists, for sketch artists, for painters, for singers, and everyone to sort of showcase their art. And I'm so grateful that CB8 does that. I think it's so wonderful, and I hope you continue to do it. But in my role as chair of this committee, I think that it is so joyful to be able to interact with a community of people who think like this, who understand all of that. So again, just very happy to talk about the arts in any situation.
I apologize. That's my dog playing with her squeaky toy.
That's
Yes,
good. That's good.
yes, we really are live. We're not kidding. Yes, I agree with you, Senator. And especially with children, I think that it's so important that children who aren't necessarily able to express themselves verbally can do it through the arts. I think that that's really important. And perhaps we can talk a little bit about like arts funding for the schools. But I wanted to share a story with you about I have a very good friend who is or was a guidance counselor in a school in Westchester, and one of her students was a boy who was not the most academically astute and didn't really enjoy reading, writing, and arithmetic, whatever. But and he used to hang out in her office just playing music. He was a musician, and um, so she just kind of let him stay in her office and play. Play his what was the instrument that he played? I believe it was saxophone. I want to say saxophone. But in any event, so and this boy, because she let him do this and she encouraged him and wasn't discouraging about the academic stuff, this little boy grew up and he now plays saxophone for Stevie Wonder. He's been in several of, yeah, I know, several of Stevie Wonder's tours. And so it's so important that, we recognize how crucial the arts are, especially for children. I just really think that they need to be exposed for whatever they can. And the other thing I was going to ask you is that the Board of Education, I think, does sort of what I would say a funky thing with their arts funding, and they spend an awful lot of money on arts programming, but the great majority of it goes to the arts schools. Like there's the music and art, LaGuardia, where my daughter went to LaGuardia, and they get like 90% of the funding, that school. And I think the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts gets a big chunk, but that's about it. Like, there isn't a spreading out of the various funds among the various schools. We have a lot of schools here, and it takes a lot for you to get into, the LaGuardia School and the Frank Sinatra School, or is it Tony Bennett School or Frank Sinatra? I think it's Frank Sinatra School, yeah, of the Arts. So I don't really know. I mean, you don't really have like the authority to do this, but can you talk a little bit about the need for elementary schools to have? This is what I feel. I feel like the principals, when they're faced with budget cuts, automatically go to the arts. They just, all right, well, we can shave a little of this program and we can do this, because they're not, the key things are the academics, and we want to be able to show strong academics. What can we do about that? Are there any ideas for how to sort of make it more, I don't know what the word is, like level, like that the leveling of the arts programs should happen in New York?
I think that's certainly right. And again, not taking anything away from LaGuardia and the Frank Sinatra School. These are wonderful programs. And but that should not take away from arts programming across all the schools. I think there needs to be more robust arts programming and funding for it in every school throughout New York City and New York State. Because how do we know where the next saxophone player for Stevie Wonder will be,
Yep.
right? And that's such an incredible story that you told, and so happy to hear it. And until that person takes the first step, these musicians are trained. You're everyone's born with intellectual curiosity and especially musical and art curiosity. But unless you get that exposure, you have a music or art teacher at an elementary school level, and they expose you to this wonderful world of the arts, or a music instrument, and you see that you have a knack for it, and then you can develop it. But if the average public school can't afford instruments, can't afford to pay a music teacher, or they have one that is here part-time or not, you know, all of that, I think, speaks to, I think, what we were talking about earlier about the arts. We need to start viewing them as much more foundational than they are. And I think because of high stakes testing, because of, as you said, the focus on the academics, I think a lot of schools and principals and teachers are concerned with that they want to be able to bring forth these amazing grades and so on. And yes, that is important. But at what cost? We shouldn't reduce the overall pie of funding or not expand it enough to be able to do that and at the same time maintain arts funding. So I would, one of the things that I've tried to do in Albany with my colleagues is to, audit and mandate the way that arts funding is handled and distributed throughout the state of New York. Um, and we need to keep increasing it. Like I think that there is a real need there to hire more art teachers, to hire more music teachers, to have it be something that's part of a type of a core curriculum. So I do agree because, let's be honest, there is real data, not just anecdotal data. There's real data that shows that students who have exposure to the arts and music do much better in math, in reading, and in science. So it's good policy and it's good education, and we should do it.
Thank you. I think that's wonderful. Okay, switching gears a little bit to housing. The issue of housing is obviously a big one. And we have in Yorkville, I know, well, let's say this. In Midtown, I understand the problems with trying to convert office buildings into housing, which was initially I thought, well, what's the problem? We have these big things. And so now I sort of get it a little bit. But in Yorkville, we have a different problem. Actually, I don't know that it's a problem, but we have a different issue in that there are quite a few garages, I hear, that could actually be turned into housing with far less problems. Um, and I think that the mayor is trying to do it with his City of Yes things. But in any event, what do you think? What's your position on housing in general? I mean, obviously, we need to build more housing. What are the problems that you see, or what are the issues that we need to address as we embark upon this legislative season?
Well, I think housing is very important, and it's become, I think, an increasingly pressing issue when you consider the lack of affordable housing. When I was a youngster growing up, I know that there was a program called the Mitchell-Lama program, and it provided for quality housing for working families, and it was a great program. And then it phased out, and I don't think there was ever a discussion or there wasn't an implementation of a Mitchell-Lama 2.0 to maintain it. So a lot of buildings opted out and a lot of buildings, some stayed. But, there was that layer of affordable housing that was affordable for working families that provided, really good apartments. So over the years, what we've had is this greater stratification of housing where you have like super expensive apartments that very few can afford, and then not enough deeply affordable housing or affordability that is for a long period of time, similar to the way that Mitchell-Lama was mandated for 30 years. You didn't see that with going forward. And without that, I think we've created a situation where unless you're super wealthy, it is very difficult to look around and find good affordable housing or an apartment that's big enough to raise a family. There's a lot of challenges there. So I do believe that we should leave no stone unturned. I know you've mentioned office space and garages, and I'm not an expert in understanding how they would convert the floor plans to meet building codes. because there has to be a certain amount of light and air and windows in order to make a space a habitable space. But I'm sure people who understand this better than I have are working that out. But beyond that, I think we should explore certainly, conversion of unused office space into viable housing, and we should look at any other issue. But tenant protection is extremely important. Having a way of protecting tenants through good cause or otherwise, I believe is a way to build continuity in communities. I think the best way to preserve and enhance the economic viability of a community is to ensure that residents of all economic areas can remain in a community and not have to move every couple of years because they got priced out, or they got put out. So I do think that building in tenant protection will build that continuity, will build that base where people feel vested in their community. They feel that they are, they have a sense of ownership in their community, and therefore you'll have, better outcomes for schools and parks and public safety and things of that nature when you build that vested interest in a community. So definitely we do need more housing.
Okay. I'm going to turn to a few questions that have come in from the public. And there's a woman named Sarah says, I'm a constituent of the senator in Yorkville. And wait a minute, I lost my place on the, sorry. I'm sorry. And a municipal retiree. I, along with some 250,000 New York City retirees, are extremely concerned about being forced into private Medicare Advantage plan, which will most certainly negatively impact retiree health care access and quality. New York State Bill 2324, let's see, S4191 prohibits the diminution of health insurance benefits of public employee retirees. And she says, I don't see that Senator Serrano is a co-sponsor. Can you talk about why you don't support the legislation, and do you support New York City retirees in their struggle to maintain their health benefits?
Thank you
Take it
for
away.
raising. No, certainly. And I wrote down the bill number, and I certainly will familiarize myself with that. I mean, whether I'm on a bill or not, well, as a co-sponsor, that shouldn't be a signal that I'm not supportive. Usually I need to haven't learned about it as well, or so on. So I will certainly research this bill, and what the issues that are being raised sound very, sound concerning. And I think my understanding is that this is a city issue, but we're looking for a legislative solution for it, I assume. But I can do that, and I can follow up with this constituent if she wants to leave her number, and I would be more than happy to speak more in depth with her about it.
Okay, great. And Jane Lindberg has a question. Rather than converting always full garages, would the senator support mandating below market rate rental units in every apartment building of 10 floors and above? Do you support good cause eviction with the amendment that caps rent increases?
Yes, I do. As I mentioned in my earlier statement, I do support good cause. I'm a very proud co-sponsor of that legislation. I know that they're still working on it. I know that there's discussions and negotiations, but on a conceptual level, it is very important to build in that tenant protection. As far as having all buildings have deeply affordable units, of course, that one's an easy one. That's such a no-brainer. Every new development should have built-in affordability that goes forward in perpetuity. That is how we can ensure that, young families, new immigrants, folks who have been here for a long time can afford to remain. And I think it's incredibly important. We talk about maintaining communities, and making sure that people who were in places like the Bronx during the lean times, and we see a resurgence and a regrowth in that part of my district, but can they afford to stay, or will they be priced out? It would be horrible to see that happen, pricing out. So without building in and mandating affordability, without good cause, without these protections, we may lose an entire segment of our population that brings so much to our community.
Thank you. Uh, I cannot pronounce this person's first name, and I apologize. But the question is, what do you think of the creation of the 6 magnet schools, at least in terms of funding in New York City?
The 6 magnet schools.
I don't know if this is a proposal. The person doesn't say if this is a specific, there's no bill number or anything, so I'm not sure. But I guess we should generally talk about magnet schools.
Right.
Do you think, go ahead.
I'm not entirely familiar. I'm not sure what she means by like I used to hear that term when I was a kid in the 70s.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the magnet school or where the magnet schools are right now. Forgive me for not
Yeah,
knowing.
no, it's okay. Yeah, I think we'll have to get some more information about that question. Okay, so
Yeah, more than happy.
if you're
Again, all
listening
of these,
now,
yeah, all of these questions, I'm more than happy to follow up, and I can put my number in the chat, whatever. But we can certainly follow up on these issues because they're very important, very interesting issues.
right. Okay, here's one. This is from my friend Todd Stein. I recently fought to get my mother 24/7 care through Medicaid. Took a lot to actually fight to get it. She's turning 90 in March, and she's been in a wheelchair for 9 years since she survived a significant stroke. Her medical needs require a split shift home care, but Medicaid was offering a 3-day, 4-day live-in, which didn't allow for her changing rotation. So he went to he did several appeals and had to pay for an elder care attorney to help. If she didn't have a son like me with funds to pay for the legal support, she never would have had the ability to have this care to which she is entitled. How do we make, here's the question, how do we make it easier for seniors to have the care through Medicaid without having to fight? How can we bring more support to our seniors that are the most vulnerable, that they need, the care that they need? And if I can just add something into this question, I do believe that recently there was a change in Medicaid, where if you are under Medicaid, you can name the person who's going to take care of you and in your home. So do you know about that? And can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, I think to the overarching question, I think it is a real tragedy that senior citizens, elderly, who have worked their whole lives, who've helped build this community and build so much of what we enjoy and take for granted, as they grow older, there really isn't a support safety net for them. And you know, there really isn't a mechanism to ensure that folks as they age will have the types of services that they can afford, that are comprehensive, and that they value the lives of these people who have given us so much and have worked so hard and have built this economy. And I could go on and on and on. But I can just imagine. I've heard stories. This is probably not an uncommon, unfortunately, story that he's expressing here. And correct in what he was saying, how he was able to work to help. But imagine if there wasn't someone to help a senior to achieve the benefits that they need. I think we need to look at sort of more of a more universal way of respecting the elderly and giving them the services that they need, and doing it in a way that is dignified, and as it should be. So I really don't have the answer, but I do share the passion, and I think we need to drill down on this. Obviously, our federal partners are going to play a big role in any type of policy of this nature. But I do think that we have population that is living longer, and that's wonderful. And as we continue to make more advancements in nutrition and healthcare and in medicine, that's going to become a wonderful reality. But we have to make sure we're prepared for it so that folks can live and comfortably get the care they need, especially if they have mobility issues. So I certainly look forward to working with folks. I'd love to speak more with Todd about this and figure out ways that I could be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it is. It sort of feels like New York State, actually, the United States in general, hasn't necessarily been prepared for both the advanced aging of the population, because we have so many people who are reaching their 90s. People are living longer, and it's kind of like they got caught by surprise. It's like it's not a surprise. It's like as people get older, they need more assistance, they need healthcare, they need assistance, they need, because everybody wants to stay in their homes.
And
And
if I can add to that, I think a lot of
please.
folks, they do all the right things. They work, they pay into Social Security, they pay their taxes, they try to save up, and then they realize when they retire and as they grow older and one or two medical issues down the road, and they're like, wait a minute, so that wasn't enough? Like I
Right, what
didn't.
happened?
What happened? I thought we had a plan. I thought Social Security, I thought Medicare, I thought this, I thought that. And then they realize, no, this is not even going to, cover even a percentage. I think that is the scariest moment. When you think you've done all the preparing for decades and then it's not. So we need, I think, as a society to really rally around our seniors and understand how much they enhance our lives and bring us all the wisdom and understanding and experiences that we need now. So this is about celebrating folks in the moment, and the way you do that is make sure that their hard work is recognized and that we can at least care for them.
Right, right, absolutely. What's the most common question or issue that people call your office about?
Well, we get a lot, and I think it's wonderful. But one of the thing that I love most about this job is the constituent services. And we do offsite constituent services in places outside of my office every week. Um, Libraries, senior centers, other elected officials' offices. We set up a table and we speak with constituents in different parts of our district because it's so large. And we hear everything. We hear everything from housing, a lot of housing issues, a lot of folks in need of housing, or folks who are growing older and would love to live in senior housing, and they're not sure how to apply, or they're not sure if they can afford it or not. We have discussions about folks and their wages or jobs that they had during the pandemic. We had, I think the majority of our calls were from their benefits or their unemployment benefits that they weren't getting. We were able to help them. So I think one of probably the most important part of the job of being an elected official is to listen to and to try to deal with constituent cases. Luckily for us, we have a really wonderful constituent services staff in my office, and they've been with us for so many years, and I'm so grateful to them. And they really know how to access the different resources and agencies that can help us get to those answers. So we really don't, I can't really tell you, Lori, that there's one thing that we get a lot of calls on. It's really everything. And we do a lot of sort of detective work and uncovering to try to find the best way forward to help constituents through all of the agencies and programs that exist. And it is very gratifying work when we're able to see it through.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that, because uh, I think that it's important for people to realize that your elected official is there to help you. It's a resource. They have staff, and they can find things out for you, or they can refer you to places. And I'm not sure that everybody realizes that. It's like, you work for us, right? And it's
Right.
so
And it's our job. It's what they pay us to do.
right.
And we will sit with you as long as it takes to sort of uncover or to find a way forward, or like you said, point them in the right direction for resources. But certainly I think there isn't anything that a constituent should feel is not in our wheelhouse. We
Purview,
will,
yeah,
if
yeah,
we don't know, we'll call someone else who does. We will certainly try to find a way forward.
right. Well, thank you. All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. So I want to turn now to my favorite part of the program is when we ask you some rapid fire questions just to get to know you better. I don't know if you've ever seen the Colbert Report, but he asks the Colbert questionnaire at the end, and it's just like, don't think a lot about it. Just give the first answer that like pops into your head. Okay. What's the best sandwich?
Peanut butter and jelly.
Ah, good. Good one. Apples or oranges?
Apples.
Okay. Still or sparkling?
Sparkling.
Okay.
If you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have given you a different answer, but
Really?
I
You're,
like it now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So do I. I basically live on seltzer.
Right.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Yankees or Mets?
Yankees. I live, I live 3 blocks from the stadium.
Oh, wow.
Go
Yeah,
Yanks.
that's great. Well,
Yeah.
that's all we've got for today. Thank you so much for being with us, Senator Serrano. I hope that everyone will feel welcome to take advantage of Senator Serrano's offer of, looking things up and finding things out and helping you. I want to thank Will Brightbill, who is the wizard behind the technology. He's our district manager, and he makes all of this run and work, and gets CB8 Zooms on YouTube and Facebook and on our website. And if you missed the program today, you can watch it in a couple of days on one of those platforms, YouTube or our website or Facebook. Our website is www.cb8m.com. And I also want to thank Kevin Wu, who is also helping us he made the flyer for this program or this webinar, as I'm instructed to say. And thank you so much. This has been fun. I really liked it.
Thank you. It's been really wonderful speaking with you, and I love all the questions, and I hope folks do reach out. You could always call my office. My number is 212-828-5829. We love hearing from you. But Lori, thank you for the questions and the opportunity to speak, and for all that CB8 does for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Have a great afternoon.